The Newsday continues here on One News Now. I'm Diego Castro, bringing you the biggest headlines from around the world. U.S. President Joe Biden vows to, quote, defend every inch of NATO after Russia warned to resume nuclear tests. President Biden reaffirms the U.S. commitment to NATO's eastern flank and to the alliance's Article 5, which stipulates collective defense of any NATO member under attack. This move was made during a summit of the Bucharest 9 countries in Poland. The commitment comes following Russia's suspension of a landmark nuclear arms control treaty over strong Western support for Ukraine. Biden deemed the suspension as a big mistake.
As NATO's eastern flank, you're on the front lines of our collective defense, and you know better than anyone what's at stake in this conflict, not just for Ukraine, but for the freedom of democracies throughout Europe and around the world.
Russia is urging members of the United Nations to vote against a resolution on its war with Ukraine. The UN General Assembly is due to vote later this week on the resolution, which is expected to stress the need for a, quote, comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine as soon as possible. The draft text would again see the General Assembly demanding Moscow to withdraw its troops and calling for a halt to hostilities. The Russian government described it as unbalanced and anti-Russia. Meanwhile, Turkey bans layoffs and launches a temporary wage support scheme in 10 provinces within the earthquake zone to protect workers and businesses from the quake's financial impact. The country's official gazette reports that employers whose workplaces were heavily or moderately damaged would benefit from support to partially cover wages of workers whose hours had been cut. A ban on layoffs was also introduced in 10 earthquake-hit provinces covered by a state of emergency. Turkish parliament imposed a state of emergency in these provinces for 3 months starting February 7. Business groups and economists have said the earthquake could cost Ankara up to $100 billion to rebuild housing and infrastructure. They say it could also shave 1 to 2 percentage points off economic growth this year. We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching One News Now. I'm Diego Castro. Nigeria's residents are grappling with fights at ATMs, protests, and attacks on commercial banks. Africa's most populous nation has been struggling with a shortage of cash after its central bank decided to replace its banknotes with a redesigned currency. Bloomberg's Jennifer Sabasaja reports.
Nigeria's got a Naira crisis, and it doesn't seem to be easing. For weeks ahead of a major national election, Africa's biggest economy hasn't had enough cash for its citizens. It all started back in October when the central bank announced to demonetize the 200, 500, and 1,000 Naira notes in what they say was a chance to cut corruption, reduce excess cash, and rein in inflation. But the move spiraled into chaos. For starters, a deadline to exchange old notes in for legal tender led to long queues at ATMs and banks nationwide, oftentimes in the middle of the night and up to 7 hours long. Business runs mainly on cash in Nigeria's large informal sector, as does most of the economy. Not just that, only 60% of households, according to some estimates, have access to a bank account, and that number dips to 40% in rural places. So the shortage is grinding normally bustling shopping centers to a halt. And even getting to the front of the line isn't a feat in and of itself. Residents are only allowed to withdraw a maximum of 20,000 naira or $43 at a time. And even the machines meant to dispense these notes are running dry. It didn't need to be this chaotic. Other countries like India, the UK, and Somalia have all carried out similar demonetization schemes with varying degrees of success. Nigeria's crisis, though, comes as the naira weakens against the dollar just before presidential elections and with black market currency rampant compared to the bank-controlled market. And Nigeria's largely unbanked population could face even more hardship without any sharp increase in the supply of the new notes, despite the extension of the deadline.
Majority of the 61 companies who participated in the 4-day work week in Britain will continue with shorter hours. Dubbed the world's largest, Britain's 4-day work week trial ran from June to December last year. The trial, which allowed more time for house chores and time for leisure, found employees to be less stressed and have better work-life balance. All this while companies found their revenue to be unaffected by shorter work hours. In fact, some firms saw their revenue partially increase during the trial period. The man convicted of killing rapper Nipsey Hussle has been sentenced to at least 60 years in prison. That and more headlines in the entertainment front in this report from the Associated Press. And those are the top stories of the hour. Join us again at 9 a.m. as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. You can also catch One News on Signal Play. Register an account now at signalplay.com so you can stream One News live anytime, anywhere. Coming right up is Agenda at 8 a.m. I'm Diego Castro. We are One News. All sides, all the time.